All right, we got a 2010 Honda Accord in here. It's got, actually, I don't know, it's got over 200,000 miles on it, and we're going to adjust the valves on it. So I'm just going to go over that real quick and show you the basics on it. Probably do 2 cylinders, and then you can go from there. But anyway, first thing we have to do, I jacked it up and removed the passenger side wheel because we got to be able to turn the crankshaft. There's an access hole. I'll show you that when we get over to that point. The first thing we need to do is remove the valve cover. These do have rubber valve cover gaskets. I know for a fact this one's been changed in the last few years because I had to change a VVT sprocket on it. So I know it's got a newer valve cover gasket on it. So I'm not going to change that. If yours is the original gasket, I would change it. Just because of the age of it and all that. But if it's relatively new or not that old, then you should be able to reuse it. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and pull this valve cover off real quick, and then we'll get down to the valves and what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. You will need mainly a 10 millimeter and a pair of pliers to move this one vacuum hose going to the valve cover. It's the only one you really have to remove. And you can slide it off like that. I got lucky on that. Usually you got to pry them off a little bit. There's this bracket on the back of the valve cover that needs to be removed. It's 10 millimeter. There's 2 bolts. One I can get to pretty easily with electric ratchet. So that's 10 mil. There's another 10 mil on the other side of the valve cover. Real close. And I use a 1/4 inch socket and ratchet because it's hard to get in there with a big full-size ratchet. You got that wiring harness in the way. So we're going to go ahead and pull this one off. Pretty tight. A little awkward to get to, but it's not bad. And then the rest of them we can pretty much use the electric ratchet or some kind of impact on to get to. So it goes pretty quick once you get this back bracket off. And it bolts to the valve cover, so you got to take it off. It's got a bunch of lines going to it, hoses and miscellaneous stuff. It's just 2 bolts of holding on. There's nothing else holding on. And once you get those 2 out, all the rest of the stuff you can leave alone. You don't have to take anything else off. So those 2 are out. This is kind of off now. And we're just going to take off the cover that holds the coil. These are all 10 mil. Just 4 10 millimeter bolts, and then you can remove this little plastic cover, and that's got your coil packs under it. I'm going to go ahead and take all the coil packs out. There's 4 10 millimeter bolts. The battery's probably getting dead. Yeah, my battery's dead. Go get a battery real quick. Alright, so I got a new battery. I'm just going to take this last bolt off. These coil packs, just press down on the end of the clip. You'll kind of hear it release. Just pull the wire a little bit. Don't pull the wires if you don't hear that click, otherwise you'll break the connector. This one. Move this out of the way. So I'm just going to pull the coils up, and I'm going to kind of put them back in the same cylinders. Don't really matter, but I just like to do that. So I'm just going to line them up the way I take them out. Put them over here, and I'll put them back in the hole they came out of. Like I said, it really doesn't matter, but I'm kind of weird like that. This one, there we go. Being a little bit stubborn. And then that'll kind of get your wiring harness out of the way. And then I'm going to go ahead and take, there's a 10mm bolt that hoses this power steering hose on. I'm going to take that out. And then I'm actually going to take the power steering hose and loosen it away from the power steering pump. You don't necessarily have to do that, but it makes it easier to get the valve cover off, I found. And you don't really lose that much fluid at all, so I just go ahead and remove it. There's two 10mm bolts on the hose. Like I said, that's up to you if you want to remove this or not. I just find it's easier to get this valve cover in and out. You will have to check your power steering fluid afterwards. Possibly top it off if you take this off. But like you can see here, I just barely lost anything. So I just move it out of the way. That way it's out of the way, because it will kind of hang you up. Now we're just going to go down for the valve cover. And you got these little nuts. Most of them you can see real easy. There's two in the back. Normally, these caps, the actual grommet or the gasket with the washer on it, I usually just leave those in the valve cover, but you gotta be careful, you can lose one if you pull the valve cover up. Sometimes they'll try to pop out, which is annoying. So we're going to pop this up, and we'll just take our time and make sure we don't lose any of those caps down in the engine somewhere. So I'm going to go get a small pry bar. And we're just going to pry up on the valve cover. And there's a little spot on the front of the cover here that's kind of built up a little bit. I usually just take it right there and just kind of use the power steering pump as leverage. Pull it up. Broke free. Sometimes you have to fight them a little bit. This one came out pretty easy. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of be careful of, especially these two back here. Like this one's already trying to fall out. So I'm just going to pull it out. It's just a grommet or a gasket and a metal washer. You don't want to lose them. So any of the ones that look like they might fall out, I'm just going to grab. Some of them will stay in there pretty good. I say that now, they're all coming out. So just be careful with it. Now this one's trying to come out. And we're going to pull this up. Be kind of mindful of the gasket. And once you kind of clear the studs, it should come up pretty easy. I'm still kind of stuck on the studs back here in the spark plug. You're just going to pull it out. All right, now we got the valves exposed, the camshafts. So the next thing we're going to do is put it on top dead center. I'll get the tools for that, and I'll show you how to do that real quick. All right, so this is what I use. I use a deep well 19mm. All of Honda's crank bolts are 19 mil, and then two long extensions. And I use this ratchet. And what you're going to do is you're going to jack up the driver's side, or the passenger side, pull the wheel off, and you're going to see a hole right here in the plastic. You're just going to put your socket through that hole until you can lock in. You'll feel the well, you should. You got to kind of feel around for it. There. Now I'm on that crank bolt. What we're going to do is come over here to the camshafts, and we're going to line them up I tapped that center. Let me get the light real quick and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so we're gonna get in there and you're gonna turn the crankshaft counterclockwise, or clockwise, I'm sorry, until you get the marks to line up. And what you're looking for is the dot on the camshaft sprockets. There's one here at about 12:30, 1 o'clock. You got this one here is about 12:30, 1 o'clock. And then there's two notches on the pulleys themselves that line up. If those notches are over here and they're not lined up on the inside, then you're 180 degrees out and you don't want to make any adjustments like that. So the key to it is to get this right the first time. And I know it probably can't really see it that well in this, so I'll show you a diagram that I have on the computer that'll kind of make it more clear to see. But you want a dot up here, a dot up here, and then the two marks on the sprockets to meet each other in the middle on the inside. Like I said, if these marks are on the outside over here, then you're 180 degrees out. If that's the case, rotate another turn and then you'll be lined up. And what you're doing is getting the lobes off of the valve so there's no, so the camshaft's not affecting the valve clearance. And man, you can see right here, this crankshaft, this exhaust cam's really ate up a little bit. That's unfortunate. The lobe looks fine, but it's really got some material eaten up. So what we're going to do is cylinder one. This is cylinder number one, the one closest to the passenger side. And we're going to do it in the firing order. So 1, 3, 4, and then 2. So we're going to do first one, and then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then we'll go to the third one, adjust those, rotate 90 degrees, go to the fourth one, rotate 90 degrees, and then we'll go to the last one, or the second one. So 1, 3, 4, 2. And I'll kind of show you the diagram on that. But let me go get I'll pull up the diagram for these sprockets so you can see it on paper. I don't know if you can really see it on camera on this. And then we'll adjust number one here. And you're going to see the intake manifold and the fuel injectors. This is your intake camshaft, the one closest to the front of the car, the bumper. And you can see the exhaust manifold and the O2 sensor. That's your exhaust camshaft right here. So that's going to be your exhaust valves. You got 2 valves per cylinder. So you're going to be adjusting 4 valves on each cylinder. And you can adjust them, you know, once you get into position, you don't have to move the crankshaft again until you're going on the next cylinder. So they're both ready. You can see the lobe is up here and the lobes are up here. So they're both ready to be adjusted in both sides. So intake's on this side towards the front, exhaust is on the back. So I'm going to go and show you that diagram and we'll get the torque. I believe it's, well, I don't even want to speculate. I think it's 22, 25 on the intake and then 26, 29 on the exhaust, but I won't speculate until I look it up. I do quite a few of these, and I'm pretty sure that's what it is, but I'll find out for sure and show that. So anyway, I'm going to get the feeler gauges and the tools to loosen this, and then we'll check it, see if it needs to be adjusted, which I'm sure it does. She said she's never had it done. And it's got over 200,000 on it. I don't know how long she's had it, but I'm sure it's been a long time since it's been done. So we'll go ahead and adjust them, and then I'll show you that diagram real quick. All right, so here's the diagram, and you can see here you got the 2 dots on your intake and exhaust sprocket. And like I said, they're both at about 12:30, 1 o'clock, and then you got the 2 marks in the middle. And those need to line up in the middle on the inside. If they're out here again, then they're in the wrong spot. You need to rotate at 180. So we're going to go down and look. Yeah. So the intake side, it's 21 to 25 millimeters, or here's the inches. Exhaust is 0.25 to 0.29. So that's what we're going to go. I'm going to go get the feeler gauge, and we're going to get those and adjust these again. So 0.21 to 0.25 millimeters on the intake, 0.25 to 0.29 on the exhaust. So I'm going to get those real quick, and then we'll pick this back up and adjust these things. All right, so I'm going to get you set up right by the valves. I do these quite a bit on these Hondas. I work on a lot of Hondas for some reason, and which I don't mind. But I got the intake and the exhaust, and I actually got this one marked with an I. So I just know I got them, and I take, you can buy ones that are bent. But I bent these a long time ago, and like I said, it's got marked with an I for intake and E for exhaust. And I got 24, I think it's 24, let me double check. Yeah. I got 0.24 millimeters for the intake and 0.28 millimeters for the exhaust. And the reason I do that is I like to set them up a little bit loose. You know, that's right. That's one below the loosest spec on it. And in my experience, these Hondas, they go tight over time. They don't go loose. So what I like to do is just when I look at the spec, I kind of go in the upper end of the spec and make them a little bit looser. That way, maybe it lasts a little longer. If somebody doesn't keep up on the maintenance, it has a little more time before you start getting misfire codes and stuff like that. Now you can use a tool like this. It's made especially for adjusting the valves. I usually find I don't use that much or very rarely because especially like you get in the back here, it'll interfere with this strut brace and stuff like that. And I just find it's just easier. What I do is I just use a regular socket and a small screwdriver. You could use an open end, but a lot of times the open end's hard to get in there. And I just kind of keep my feeler gauge in there and just double check it a couple times before I and what you want to do is put your feeler gauge in. This, like I said, this is the intake side. I got the eye, and you're going to try to get it inside there. Now, usually on Honda, and I'm not saying this all the time, but usually on Honda, the intakes hardly ever need to be adjusted. I know there's exceptions, and sometimes you do need to adjust them. But what I found in my experience in the last 30 years is the exhaust side, it usually goes tight, and the intake side is usually pretty close to being in spec. I'm going to go ahead and try to get the feeler gauge under there. And actually, these might be a little bit loose, surprisingly. So I'm going to go ahead and run these down a little bit, and then we'll check the back side. And usually the back side is tight. Like I said, not always, but in my experience. So what I do, I just loosen both of them at the same time. And you're just going to back off that nut a little bit. Don't have to go crazy. Back it off just a little bit. And you're going to take your feeler gauge and put it inside there between the valve. And you're going to just turn it till it drags a little bit. This one's actually pretty loose, which is not too normal in my experience with these cars. So I'm starting to get a little bit of drag. I've turned about a quarter turn so far. And sometimes if you have to turn it a lot, you have to back the nut off a little more. And what I like to do is turn it till I can't move it anymore and then start backing it off. So I'm just going to kind of turn this down on the valve, and you'll kind of feel like when you turn it down, you'll kind of feel it get solid. And I can't pull this feeler gauge out right now, so what I'm going to do is just back it off a little bit. And right there, I can move it back and forth. It's got a little bit of drag, so that's where I'm going to set the adjustment as, right there. And I'm going to go ahead, and what I do, I take my finger, I just kind of tighten that adjuster nut down a little bit, and I kind of make a visual note of where this top adjuster is, like where the slot's at, so that if I turn this and it moves a lot, I'll know. Like I said, if you can get an open end in there, you can kind of hold it together. And that's the whole concept of, and then I'm going to go ahead and torque it. It doesn't look like it's moved. That's the whole concept of this tool here, is you can kind of hold it with a screwdriver and then turn it. And it would work fine on these upper ones, but in the back, this strut brace gets in the way and stuff, so I don't use it. I don't even pull it out anymore. So now that I got it tightened, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can make sure that it feels the same. I'm going to put it back under there and make sure there's a little bit of drag on it. And there is. I can get it in there, and it's a little bit draggy. So I feel like that's a good for this one. So now we're just going to go to the second one here and see if we can get under it. And this one's somewhat loose too. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it down until I can't really move the feeler gauge, and then back it off a little bit. Like right there, I turned it, and I can still move a little. So say I turned about a quarter turn. If you turn it too much and it won't turn anymore, then you're probably up against the little adjusting nut. And you may have to back that off a little bit. These are actually being turned a little more than I'm used to on these. Didn't notice the engine clattering per se. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the feeler gauge back in there. I'll be real surprised at the back exhaust valve if I get the feeler gauge in there. So I'm pretty close to not being able to move the feeler gauge. So I'm gonna almost there. And I realize this is kind of boring to watch this, but adjusting valves is kind of boring to begin with. But once you're done with it, you don't have to worry about it again for 120,000 miles or so on these Hondas. I think it's around 120. They want you to adjust them. Still turning a little bit. Alright, I'm real close to where it needs to be. I actually haven't turned as much as it looks like I have. Just try to get both your hands in there and turn it. Alright, so now, right there. So that was about 3/4 of a turn. So that's actually out pretty far. I can't move the feeler gauge. I backed it off just a hair and I can move it. So I'm going to set it right there. There's a little bit of drag on the gauge. I'm going to kind of note where that slot's at. It might have moved a little bit right there. I'm going to check the gauge. Still feels pretty good. And I think that's good. I can get the feeler gauge in there. If you move it back and forth, you can feel a decent amount of drag on it, but it's not like where you can't move it at all. And I'll show you real quick where we're going in at before I do the exhaust valves, so you kind of get an idea of what we're doing. This is the adjuster, and we're just sliding the exhaust, or this feeler gauge, in between the intake and the valve right there. And when you move this back and forth, you should feel a little bit of drag. It should go in there without too much trouble. A little bit of drag, and that's good. So that's the intake side. Now we can move over to the exhaust side. And it's the same situation. There's two adjusters back here. I'm going to go ahead and loosen those and do the same thing. And then we're going to rotate it 90 degrees and do cylinder number 3. So I'm going to go ahead and do the exhaust real quick. It's the same exact procedure we just did in the front. The only difference is you have a different spec for it. We're going to use the feeler gauge I marked E, and it's a little bit thicker on the exhaust side. It's 28 millimeters. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust those, rotate it 90, and then I'll show you about where the camshaft should be and all that good stuff. And then we just do that same thing 4 times and in line with the firing order. So now I rotated it 90 degrees clockwise until the dot here was at 3 o'clock position. The other dot should be around 3, and then your slot should be facing down. And I'll show you that on the computer again just so you can see it. And then you should see that your lobes on your camshaft on cylinder number 3 should be off of your valves. You should not be touching the valves in any way. And I'll go over and show you that real quick on the computer just so you can see it visually on a piece of paper. All right, so we're going to get up close here. You got your 2 dots, one here and one here. They're both at 3 o'clock, and then your slots are kind of down at 6 o'clock. And then you're ready to change. You're ready to adjust cylinder 3 the same way. Actually, it's 180 degrees, not 90 degrees. I'm sorry. So, and it's the same torque spec for all the cylinders. So you're going to use the same feeler gauge and everything for every cylinder. And what you're doing is just going through the firing order. So when you get to number 3 here, your lobes are off the valves, and you can adjust them. So if you don't go by the firing order, then you could be adjusting the valves when the lobe is hitting it and stuff like that. So, so of course the next cylinder will be number 4, number 2. And I'm going to adjust number 3. It's the same way as number 1, and then I'm going to rotate it, and I'll show you I'll show you what it looks like on the screen in number 2, and then we'll be done, and then just put the valve cover back on. So there's no point in keep showing you how to adjust the valves. We just did that. Like I said, you put that feeler gauge in between there and just wait till I turn it till it stops where I can't move it, and then I back it off a little bit, and you should have a little bit of drag, and that's about where you want it. So anyway, I'm going to go adjust number 3 real quick, and then we'll go, I'll show you where number 4 should be, and so on. Alright, so now we're going to number 4. I went ahead and rotated this 180 degrees on the bottom. Your dots that started up here should now be at about 6 or 7 o'clock, and then your mark should be over here. And I'll kind of show you that on the computer. And you can verify that by your cam lobes being up in the air. They're not touching the valves anyway. So we'll go over by the computer. I'll show you that just real quick, and then I'm going to do number 4. Alright, so you can kind of see here, you got the mark here about 6:30, 7 o'clock. You got the 2 slots that were in the middle, now they're on the outside. And that's where you want to be at number 4. Alright, so we're going to the last cylinder, number 2. And we're just going to rotate at 180. And when you do that, your dot should be at about 10 o'clock, round it almost back. You know, they're going to go back up to, we're almost at the top dead center, basically. So, we'll be starting over at 1, but we're not going to do that because we already adjusted it. So your dot should be at about 10 o'clock, and then your slot should be down. And we're going to go to number 2 cylinder right here. And we're going to adjust them just like we did the other 3 cylinders, and then you're done. You put the valve cover back on, coils, and start it up. Hopefully there's no rattles or ticks, and you did a good job. So I'll show you on the computer real quick. So here it is. You got your one at about 9:30, and you got one about 9, and then you got the one on the intake side is facing down, the other one's facing up. So that'll be your last cylinder, number 2. So you, like I said before, you go 1, 3, 4, 2. You rotate 180 in between each cycle, and make sure that these dots are where they're supposed to be. And you can verify that by the camshaft lobes being off the valves, and you're good to go to adjust them. And if you want to torque those nuts down to spec, I think they're 14 Newton meters. Yeah, 14 Newton meters. And then the spec again for your valves is on the intake is 0.21 to 0.25, exhaust is 0.25 to 0.29. So once you get them all adjusted, all you're going to be doing is putting the valve cover back on, your coil packs, and firing up and hoping there's no ticks or rattles, and you're good to go. So it's just a quick little video on how to adjust the valves on a Honda Accord 2010 2.5 K25 engine. They're all pretty much the same throughout the years, but double check your specs on them for your particular model. So anyway, thanks for watching. As always, God bless.